So if you go,
GitHub your name.
yeah, Holly Schinsky, SCHINSky/Spotify-browser. That's the project we're going to work with. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
Can you do it? Yeah.
So just go ahead and download that client. It's going to be the sample app that we're going to try to walk through building today. And then there's also a folder for solutions, and that has each of the modules that we're going to go through. It has the end result of each module. In case you get messed up and you're trying to go along with it, you can just take the assets from that solution for that module and copy it and start from there.
There's also a GitHub Pages tutorial that goes along with this, and so again, it's my name, hollyschinsky.github.io/Spotify browser -browser. If anybody has trouble getting the download, I have some USBs too. Is everybody good so far? Oh, sorry. Here. That's where the tutorial is. Is everybody pretty much good with that? Are we still working on downloading? Getting there? Good to go? I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. So since there's a lot to cover and we have a shorter period of time here, we have more people than we sort of anticipated. So walk along with me as much as you can, or you can always go back and visit this site and work on it at home, or any pieces that we rush through too fast. I documented it pretty well, and feel free to contact me or tweet to me if you have any questions if you are working on it at home and get stuck. So anyway, my name is Holly Schinsky. I work for the PhoneGap team at Adobe, and this is going to be the intermediate PhoneGap workshop. How many of you guys were in the beginner workshop today? Were you guys able to get the developer app, the desktop app, CLI? Some? Okay, because we're going to use those tools and what we learned from that. Hopefully, you can use those tools if you have them. If not, you can always default to the browser. And obviously, you're not going to be able to see all the native device features working, but it's still a way that you can work along with it. And we're going to be learning about a new framework that's out there that may be something that interests you as well. So you can at least do that part of it, even if you don't have those tools all installed. And is there anybody here that's already been doing PhoneGap development? Okay, and web developers in general? Most of you guys? All right, cool. And the PhoneGap people, are you using frameworks or what are you? Oh, you're Jed. Oh, okay. Hey. Okay, okay, awesome. Yeah, cool. Nice to meet you. a good framework. Everyone should check out Touchstone JS as well.
Which of you two is talking the other?
I know, I wrote an app recently very similar to this using your framework. So anyway, so in this class, yeah, and a write-up. I'll have to link to that. It's actually all on my blog, which is here on this http://devgirl.org. I have a lot of different posts with different frameworks that I've used to build a similar app. This one happens to be, well, before I get there, you guys all sort of saw this Spotify browser. So it's a simple app that is interfacing with the Spotify APIs. Previously, the other demos apps that I did, I used the iTunes API. They're both really nice and work somewhat similarly. The Spotify is a little bit easier to use for a workshop like this, so that's kind of why I chose that. You can see some screenshots of what we're going to be building and what the end result will be. And let me show it really quick, actually. Oop. Can you guys see that okay? So it's really simple. We just have a couple criteria for searching, like what song do you want to search, any kind of search term, and then the number of results defaults to 25. You can go up to 50, so you can set that to whatever you want, and then hit submit. And you get back your list of items that match. So you can scroll through, and this is using Framework 7. I don't know how many people have heard of it. Anybody? Okay, so it's another option for UI frameworks. And in this case, it works really well for this type of workshop. Thank you. Appreciate it. But we're going to be trying not to focus too much on the actual UI framework, but more just mobile development in general. So there's a lot of good options out there just to keep in mind, but this is a nice one to get started with. So in here, we can do some things like swipe outs, where you can preview a song. I have no idea what this song is, but this is a 7-second preview that I've got set. You can do a add to favorites, and you can do social sharing. So this is using a plugin, which you would need to have the CLI working to actually test this out and have your full setup. But it's a third-party, really cool plugin that allows you to use your native device share features. So that's the list view. You can also filter items. So, you know, whatever matches in the list, you can filter there, which is nice. And then if you click on an item, you get a detail view. So the detail view also has a preview option, and you can do the add to favorites. You could open this directly in Spotify. So one of the pieces of data that we get back is the link to actually link to it in Spotify. So if you have it on your app or have it on your phone, it'll open it in the app. And then again, we have another way to share an item. So if I show you the sharing quick, you can see I took the data from that results and put it into a message to send to somebody with a little image, and that's kind of how that works. So these are all things that you will learn during this workshop as far as we can get through. If we don't get through it all, like I said, you can definitely work on this at home, and it's documented pretty well. So that's the app. Does anybody have questions about that? All good? Oops. So I just wanted to cover some general mobile application development concepts. No matter what framework you're using, you need to understand, and some of you may already have experience with this, but let me make this smaller. So there's a whole, I guess, the concept around view stacks and navigation. So when you start on your main page in your view, you need to navigate through and hold history. So you need to hold your navigation history as you're going through pages. It's like in this image below, the bottom page is the main view. And as you're going through more views till the detail view, then you're going to be doing like a push pop kind of thing. So you push to the next view, pop it off the stack when you go back. So when you hit the back button, you're doing a pop sort of mechanism. But it's important to understand with navigation and routing and just in general for any framework you use, you need to be aware of like making sure you're using something that's keeping track of state and history and view stacks and that sort of thing. In this app, we're only using one view stack, but I had this Ionic simple app there. They have a tabs app, so you can see like down at the bottom, if you used a tabbed approach, that would be more like a multiple view stacks. So behind each tab, you would have another set of views that you would navigate between and keep track of your history between. So there's, multiple approaches to, depending on the app that you're building, there's, like a master detail split view if you're doing an iPad app. There's a lot of different patterns, but it's important to understand what you're building when you start out. What kind of navigation do you need? So in this case, we're doing a simple view stack. And then I guess I kind of covered this, but basically just understanding that, the concept of multiple stacks behind a tab and saving history. And then single page application. Has everybody? It depends on the framework, but typically in the ones that I've used, yes. That's sort of like Angular has a router that works in a similar way. I'm not as proficient with Android and the whole hardware back button and all of that handling, but typically you have to follow the guidelines for that platform. And Framework 7 has Android support as well for material design. A lot of people thought it was iOS only because it started out that way, but they've added that recently, and I've been in touch with the person that wrote it, and he's going to be adding Windows support this year. So for those of you looking for that, but are we all familiar with single page applications? Mostly, it's a pretty common concept, but for those of you that don't know about it, it's basically just using client-side templates so that you're changing out content on the client rather than making calls to a server and waiting for that HTML page to come back and display it that way. So for performance, it drastically speeds up the speed of your app, basically. So when you're getting your data back, the whole idea around it is you're going to replace the template that's showing with the next view, and you're going to load that data that came back. And we're going to work on this today, but you're going to take the data you came back, bind it to a template. In this template here, we see expressions. You use the expressions, and that's how your view is populated when the data comes back. And typically you use a router. This is a Framework 7 syntax, so it looks different depending on what framework you're using or if you write your own. But the idea is when you load this list template, you're going to send in a data context, and that's what's going to bind to the expressions in the template.
And the data context is a local.
Well, in this case, we're just querying, but yes, you would, if you wanted to go both ways, then yes. In this case, when we go through the list page, we will see how we're doing that. But I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with some of these frameworks. The Ionic guys are here doing a session right now. It's a great framework too. And there's Onsen UI, which, have you guys heard of that? Anyone? They're going to be here too, maybe today or definitely tomorrow. But that's another really nice UI framework, and they've recently added material design support, or React. They're actually starting to support React. So if you're they started more based on Angular. So if you're looking for a UI framework with React as well, that's something to check out. Still in beta. And then Framework 7, of course, one we're using. And the reason, like I said, that we chose it for this workshop is that it's kind of got its jQuery-like syntax. It's its own DOM library that it uses that is built for speed and simple, and most people kind of can look at the code and understand what it's doing, because we can assume that I think a lot of people are familiar with jQuery, so it makes it easier to actually build out the code for this. And they have really nice end result. The UI components are really nice. They have a bunch of options right out of the box. If you look at they have a kitchen sink app. If you go to their main site, actually, you can see the URL up here, or you can just Google Framework 7. But when you compare them, you can look between these two sets of UI components to see everything that they have. So it's definitely worth, checking out all the different things out of the box. They have a login screen and a lot of different things. They also support a lot of performance optimizations like lazy loading and HTML caching. There's a lot of things which we're going to go over, but check out their website and play around with the kitchen sink app a bit, because it gives you a better idea of everything that they support. And then Kendo UI from Telerik is another a really nice UI framework that I don't know if a lot of people know that they have a free offering now. So they're also here doing a session today, I think this afternoon. But they're not doing it on Kendo, but definitely go talk to them if you want to find out more. They're also the people behind NativeScript. Have you guys heard of that? That's the Telerik guys. So. And then, so the ones that I just talked about are more based on, or like more full stack, or they have built-in navigation and view stack handling like I was talking about. But there's other more CSS-based frameworks that you can use for mobile. Ratchet's a popular one. If you don't want all of that stuff predefined for you for routing and everything like that, you can use something like Ratchet. It's more lightweight. Zerb Foundation for apps is relatively new. It was Foundation to begin with, and then it's kind of like Bootstrap but for apps. And then Topcode is an Adobe framework that is all CSS only and built for performance, and that's actually what Onsen UI uses underneath. There's a lot of options, is, I guess, the takeaway from that. But so I kind of covered this already, but Framework 7 has this jQuery-like syntax. You can do DOM selectors. We use the $, just that's sort of in the examples. They all use that, so I kept it like that, but it's very similar to jQuery. There's no reliance on a third-party framework like Angular or, but it actually does work with all of these different frameworks. There are samples out there that you can look at in their example apps that work with Angular, React, different frameworks. Tons of UI components and the built-in features, pull to refresh, all of that good stuff. There's also a plugin architecture, so you can write plugins and share plugins, not in the PhoneGap term of plugins, but to add more UI features to Framework 7. They have a plugin API. And then, of course, iOS, Android, and Windows, hopefully this year. So I also talked about this a little bit, but some of the things that you should pay attention to if you're just getting into mobile. A lot of you may know this already, but the material design versus building for iOS. There's some little things that are worth noting, like the back button on iOS always has that little less than sign, whereas like on material, you're going to see more of like an arrow. That's sort of a standard UI thing. So when you are building apps, you'd want to use the material version for Android and so on. So, and then just the way that the transitions, when the page is loaded, it might be loaded differently based on what platform it's running on. What else did I want to point out? I think I have it. But play around with those two kitchen sink apps and you'll see some differences.
Transition for us of using the right version of the framework, or do we have to do that in the PhoneGap app itself?
It depends on what framework you use. Framework 7, there's actually a tutorial on there. There's a couple things that you have to do, but you can do it all in one app. So, and supposedly he's going to be adding platform detection this year so that you won't have to go through those extra steps. But if you look at the docs, and then the tutorials. There's maintain both iOS and Material themes in a single app. So there's a couple little tweaks that you have to make, but you can do it. I believe that Ionic will do platform detection, and they don't support Windows quite yet, but it just depends on which framework. It's not really a PhoneGap thing. It's more of what you pick, to go with. Let's see. The other thing with the kitchen sink app, if you guys are familiar with the material design, there's things like, let me see here, the floating action button is more of a material design thing. That's that little button down the bottom there, purple button. That's only going to be in material design typically. And then chips are another Android-y thing. So he's got support for all of the different unique components, I guess, between the two platforms. So it's, and the text input field is another one that looks very different between the platforms, and you can have that out of the box using this framework, which is nice. So does anybody have any other questions about that? All right, so one thing I wanted to talk about really quick, how many people have the PhoneGap CLI configured to run locally or Cordova? Okay, so some of you do. So you guys can run everything on your devices or on an emulator and use remote debugging. Are you familiar with remote debugging? So using Chrome, you can debug for Android. So if you've got, you need to have your USB plugged in, but basically, I have it open, I believe, too. If you go to, if you go to Chrome/inspect or //inspect, and then it's going to pull up any devices that you have running or emulators. So I have the emulator running right now. So it's telling me I have this and I can inspect it. So you can click inspect, and then you can use the Chrome Dev Tools to further debug your app, just like you would normally do on a web page. So it's pretty easy now to actually debug on your device. So right now I don't have this plugged in, but if I plugged this in, then I would have a list. I'd have two options to inspect, and I could use either one.
This, it sounded like you said the emulator is built into Chrome.
No.
Pick the device.
That's through the PhoneGap CLI. We're spawning the emulator because we have the Android SDK as part of the requirement for, yeah. So,
And what is it that you're calling emulator?
well, when you just say PhoneGap run Android, it will find, you'll have, an emulator instance set up. There's other emulators you can use, Genymotion, and there's different ways to do it, but the PhoneGap CLI will actually pop up the emulator or run it on your, if you have your Android device plugged in, then you can do it there as well. I just didn't mess with that for this, but it's pretty easy. And then use the Chrome developer tools like normal. On iOS, I've also got the app running on the simulator on the iPhone 6. So you can go into Safari. Are you guys familiar with the Safari developer tools or debugging? No? So you need to enable a couple things in Safari to make this work, but you want to get this develop menu, and once you have that develop menu, then you can go in and you have to set a setting on your phone. I'll post something when I post my follow-up of the instructions to do that. It's not hard. But once you do, then you can, anything that you're connected to, you can debug. So if I want to debug the app running there, my simulator, I can just do that. I was already connected. But so you can see, you can go through and do similar things to what you would do with the Chrome developer tools. And you can inspect and set breakpoints. If you go to it's a little different in the layout if you're not used to Safari. They use resources to get to the code, and then you put the scripts, and that's where you can get to your JS files. But it's really helpful to really figure out what the problem is when you have it running on your emulator or device. Does anybody have questions? Did you guys get to Winery, the people that were in the beginner? So for this purpose, if you don't have the PhoneGap CLI installed with an SDK locally, but you are using the developer app on your phone and pairing with that, then you can use Winery to debug. And it's a little bit less fancy of a way to debug, but it works. And so if you had that set up, then that's good. You can use that during the session. If not, we have PhoneGap docs on it that are here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but if you go to the PhoneGap docs and go to the PhoneGap developer app, docs.phonegap.com, and then go to the developer app debugging, and you'll see how to set it up. You're basically adding a script tag, which the final Spotify browser project that you downloaded has a commented out script tag in it, and you just need to uncomment and change the URL to the one that you're running on. But the instructions are all here. You can walk through it if you didn't attend that session or it wasn't set up yet. Let's see. So I just had some images showing that. Ah. All right, so that was basically it for my slides. So we can get into the project itself. If we go back to the main GH pages for the project, if you hit start and go to module 1. So what we're going to do to create the project, I guess, how many people do have the CLI? Okay, so if you don't have that, you can try to install it. If you have Node, you can, here's the, or the Cordova CLI. How many people don't have any CLI, I guess, for PhoneGap or Cordova? All right, so maybe we're good. Otherwise, you can go to npm and type in PhoneGap and install it from there. But once you have it, so we've got the main project. You're going to create a new project. We have a new thing for templates, a new support to specify a template when you're actually doing a create. And if you see here, from the command line, you do the -- template and you specify the template name. If you typed PhoneGap template list, let me make that bigger. You can see the options that are there now. And this is actually getting, or is added to Cordova as well. It's going to be something that we can start using after this week or after today, but we'll document that further. And then you can link to any project that's in a GitHub URL or NPM, so not just these options, and you can create a base project off of a React app or whatever you want at that point. So we're going to create the project based on the PhoneGap template framework 7. So this command that I have here, you can, if you want to actually specify the name, then you can, and an ID, or you can just do the first one. It'll just create hello world as the name and ID. And that's important. The name and ID are important for when you actually go to submit it to the App Store. Those values are used. So once you guys, is everybody creating the project or everything good? So once you have the project created, if you're on the command line, then cd into it and try to run it, and just, you'll see what the basic Framework 7 base app looks like. I actually have it up in my browser. And if you don't have it all installed, you can just try to open it in your browser. But it's a very simple app, just sort of showing like how you could do some navigation. It has some links, but we're going to basically end up taking all of this out. But it gives you the setup with the libraries that you need to get started. So It's kind of nice to start with, and some boilerplate code that we'll use. So once you get that started, then you can go ahead, once you've looked at that and verify that it's actually running and it looks like that, you could run it from the CLI and pair it with your phone. There's lots of options, so I don't know what everybody's setup is. The least case is the browser. Not everything will work for every step, but you'll be able to play around with it some. Any of the native device features, obviously, you're going to need to be able to pair with the PhoneGap developer app. But do whatever is easiest for you, I guess, when you want to test it out. And then in the first step here, because Framework 7 doesn't come with a prepackaged icon library, you can add your own. You could add Ionicons is another popular one. In this one, I'm using Font Awesome. You could, oops, looks like my link didn't work there, but you can see the link here if you want to go look at it further to see what types of icons they have. They have something for everything. But we're going to add that to the project. So you're going to open the index.html and add this reference to the style sheet so that we can actually use icons throughout. And I wanted to point out here the difference, some of the built-in Framework 7 icons, like for instance, if we look at the app, this little bars icon up in the top right corner is already included. There's some real basic ones. When you're using those icons, the syntax is, you always use the icon class, and then for the ones that are built in, it's icon dash and whatever the icon name is. For Font Awesome, you always use the icon and the FA class, and then FA dash whatever the icon you want is. So if you have, an editor that you're using IntelliSense, and it's easy to see what's available, but you can also go to the website and look at the different fonts somewhere on here. Anyway, there's a cheat sheet of them that you can look at. So that's just sort of a setup step. Does anyone have questions, or all good with that? Anyone need help? I don't know how much you guys are able to work along with this. I'm kind of going quick, I know, but everything is here. So if you want to go back and do it at home, like I said, do that. The end result, well, actually, in this bonus step, I just had, if you want to run the app you downloaded yourself to play around with it, you can. So some of you may have already done that. You can run it in your, pairing it with your device or through the CLI or in the browser if needed. Has everybody seen the PhoneGap desktop app? I guess I should show that quick. Like here it is. Right now I have it in here. Oops. There's a little bug right now that's getting fixed, but you have to, if you get that address in use at the bottom, you need to click the settings and change the port, and then it will serve it. But if the green line is on the left, that's the one that's currently being served, and then the IP address is right down at the bottom there. And then on your phone, you'd use the PhoneGap developer app to connect to that URL. I don't know. Have you guys seen that? Anybody not seen that? Let me show that really quick. So if I have, the PhoneGap developer app icon I have here, I already had it running. Let's start over here. So when it loads, it will come up and ask you for a URL, IP address here, and then if I look, I can see that it's being served on that address. Let me move this. So if I enter that, and hit connect. Hopefully it'll work. Looks like it might.
I think you're on core quality, so it might be blocking.
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
Yeah, so you need to be on the PhoneGap network.
Yeah,
component or,
that's important. So this isn't gonna work. Do I have to stay on Corp for Connect?
for, when you switch to PhoneGap, you're gonna have to be close connected.
All right, so,
You can do it, I mean, it'll work sometimes, depends on us.
yeah.
I was just get it out of the way. Tommy had the same problem. last
Okay, yeah, the Adobe Corp tends to be favored. Go figure.
I'm also getting the content security policy meta tag error. Is there a solution for
Okay,
that?
yeah, which version are you working on of the app?
Of your
Are
app?
you using the starter project, the template 7? Did you create the template and then you're on the first
Yes.
module?
Yes.
If you open up your index.html, it should not be in there anymore. I took it out, but did you get the, you just did it now?
I've got index HTML open.
Here, let me look at it, 1 second. Let me just start this over. All right, hopefully that's good. All right, so in the www folder is the index.html where we can specify a content security policy, which we're going to talk about in module 4 or 5, but it shouldn't be in there. Right now, I left it, I tried to keep it simple to begin with, so I don't have one. So you shouldn't have one if you use the template, but did you use maybe Cordova and create a
This
basic?
looks exactly the same as that.
Well, to get around it, there is a solution. So the content security policy is like a whitelisting way to secure your apps. Let me find where we talk about it. It's in the configuring, I guess it's section 7. If you scroll down to content security policy, I talk about it there. This is the custom one that will work for this app because of the way that it's trying to retrieve data from Spotify and all the things. This is what you will need to make it work. The one that comes by default in the Cordova Hello World project will not work with this app. So you have to customize it this way. Are you running on your device using the local CLI? Yeah, okay. Android?
Yes.
So you'll also need to add this allow navigation, this next step here. You're advanced. That's good. So if you get the content security policy error, you're going to want to copy this meta tag into your index.html towards the top if you want to get around that. Mhm.
Where did that come from? How was that generated? Because you were using a different API. How would you know what the security policy is?
It's actually based on the Cordova whitelist plugin. It's a newer thing that we are using now to help people secure their apps better. And there's a whole bunch of documentation around it that,
The Cordova whitelist plugin.
yes, yes. So I have links in here to those docs.
Okay.
You'll definitely want to go, yeah, see this to learn more about it and how to customize it. The Cordova whitelist guide and the plugin have lots of different options. Obviously, you're not going to want to use wildcards when you go to production, so this is kind of a way to get around it for now, but you can customize it, and there's a website, CSP is awesome, I think it is, that will help you actually build it out. So, but that's all in those guides.
Absolutely good.
All right, so let me try the pairing again, just to show how that's working. So I'm on PhoneGap. So you have to be on the same network on your phone and on your laptop. I'm just going to stop and start again. You can also do the PhoneGap serve from the command line. It does the same thing. It's going to give you the IP address to pair to. This is just a GUI around it, so you can run it either way. So let me show my device again. And it will actually keep the IP address from the last time you ran it, which is nice because it often serves on the same one again. So you don't have to retype this every time like I'm doing. But because I switched from the corp network to this now, it's all changed. All right. Oops. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Exactly. There we go. Hooray. All right, so now it's paired and I can do, you know, everything that is supported by the PhoneGap developer app. So the PhoneGap developer app, you can go get in the app stores if you don't have it already. Just search for PhoneGap under iTunes or Google Play. And that's what you use to pair. That was what that little connection screen I had was. So I can go in here and, you know, play my music. Oh, if my volume's up, I guess, maybe. Or not. I'm not sure why that's not playing. It played before, but oh, somebody else has it. It works. I'm not sure what it's doing right now, but when you do run it in the developer app, any of the plugins that come with the developer app are supported, which is, in this case, we need the media plugin, and that is in there, so it should play fine. And I may have something going out my volume here, but if you're using like the social sharing plugin, that's not included yet in the developer app. We're going to be adding it soon, but most of the common ones you use, all of the PhoneGap core ones are all supported, so you don't have to do any adding of plugins for this to work. It's sort of a sandboxed environment that you can use to play around with different features and apps. So that's basically the PhoneGap developer app and the PhoneGap desktop app. Oops. And obviously you can run that on Android as well. So once you're able to try out the app in one way or another, either the browser, the pairing, or with the local CLI, then you can move on to building out the app. So in the next section, where I talk a little bit about the Framework 7 views and pages, and that's a specific to the framework, so I'm not going to spend much time on that, but just to help with this workshop, basically we're going to be creating pages. So the list page, the detail page, those are all going to be in page elements, wrapped in page elements. And that's the key to focus on, I guess, for this. There's always going to be a view main class, which we're going to add in the JavaScript initialization. But if you look at the picture, there's a toolbar at the bottom, which Framework 7 calls it a toolbar. The view is the whole thing. And it's contained within a views element, so you can have multiple view tags in a views wrapper. So if you had a tabbed navigation sort of app, then you would probably be doing that. And then the nav bar, they call this the nav bar. So in the steps, you're going to want to open up index.html, and it's in the www folder. If I just open it quick. So in www, we're going to open up index.html. We're going to set the layout to dark just because it looks nice with this type of app. There's a light or a white and a dark layout, but there's also classes to do different colored themes, and they have different colors for iOS and Android that you could use. I'm not really taking advantage of those in this app, but you can be aware that they are there. And then, let's see, we're basically going to build that main index page. So in the index.html, this views section, starting here, you want to replace with what I have on the tutorial. So that's going to build out the page with the criteria and the submit button and all of that. So that'll set up the main page. So by the time you get done with this, you should be able to open it up and see it the first page look like that. If anybody has trouble too, please raise your hand because we have people here to help from the team. So they're all in the back here. So please raise your hand and get help. So once you get through that, the slider obviously isn't going to work yet because it is not tied to any code behind it. So if you're running it, let's see. I'm just going to do it in the browser because it's quick. Well, actually, that's my default one, so that's going to work fine. But if I go to my solutions and take the first one, and oops, you guys can do this too. Oh, sorry. If you get stuck and you just want to go take it out of the solutions, that's the end result for module 1. So I take that out and I'm going to put it in my tester app. Oops. And replace the content. So you're going to want to replace the config.xml in the www folder and then run that. So if I wanted to show you guys the CLI way to serve, so this is like the other way than the desktop app. For those of you that weren't in the previous session, you can just type PhoneGap serve from your root of your project, and it's going to give you the URL there at the bottom. So then I need to go back to my app.
Is there a shortcut to get back to the PhoneGap app?
Yes, there is, but we found yesterday that we think that there's an intercepted touch event happening. You're supposed to do a 3-finger tap or a 4-finger tap.
So you just kill it.
So yeah, because we did not, we just discovered that, but I think they must be intercepting the same event. Some kind of a touch event there, but yes, on any other app that you run, if you hit a 3-finger to go back or 4-finger to refresh, vice versa, but that should work just fine and it's a lot faster. Actually, the developer app expert is in the back of the room, so Michael, do you know which? Sorry, I'm totally putting you on the spot. 3-finger tap, what do you think is happening? Do you know why the whole touch event? The fact that it can't refresh or do anything with the...
Sometimes you can do it. I tend to sit there and talk.
Yeah, maybe it's me, but I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so now you can see that it's doing auto reload and it's running on my phone. So I hit submit, nothing happens because this is not wired to any code. If I try to drag the slider, nothing happens. And it's got all that fun stuff going on. And that's another thing we're going to talk about, actually, if we can get there. All right, so you've got the main view. Are you guys like able to do this along with me, or are you just sort of watching? I can go faster if you're watching, or slower. Or please feel free to use our help too, if you run into any trouble. So if we move on to the next step. Oh, I also have you add the Spotify icon. So right now you can see this little Spotify icon down at the bottom. For that to display, you need to grab it from the final project and copy it into your image folder, IMG folder in www. So it's pretty self-explanatory there. And then if you want to set up the icon to use it through CSS class, then you can do that there. Sorry that the formatting, oh, there we go. And then you can see the new page once you refresh, make sure that it looks right. And then in the app initialization code, what was already in there for the Framework 7 template is going to look somewhat similar but it's not exactly what we want because we want to specify some different options. So if we open it up, this is the original. I'm not able to zoom. But you guys can see that there's where you're initializing your My App, setting up the DOM library selectors, and then this is where we're setting up the main view with different options. For ours, we're adding a couple other options because we're using templates. There's different ways you can use Framework 7, and again, I'm not going to get all into that, but you can use it to load Ajax pages, or you can use it with templates, and in this approach, we're using templates. So I want to pre-compile them for performance reasons, so I set that flag to true, and then I don't have to compile them on my own manually. And then template 7 pages is what is going to allow me to easily specify a data context and a data template on a link, so it will bind those together, which we're going to do in the next step. But those things need to be set for all the template support to work properly. And then modal title is just going to be the name of any pop-ups that happen in your app. It defaults to Framework 7. Obviously, you don't want that to pop up. So you want to set it to whatever you want your app title to be on alerts and things like that. And here we're setting a dynamic navigation bar, which just adds some nice animations between, it's for iOS only, but it adds some nice effects when you're going between views, which you guys can kind of look at that a little more on their documentation. And then DOM caching set to true for performance reasons, again, so it doesn't try to reload unless it's changed. And then, yep, I specified the modal title there. I talked about that. So in the myapp.js, there's a whole bunch of other stuff we don't need in that initial template, so just clear it out so it doesn't get distracting. Basically, from here down, you want to delete that. But one thing worth mentioning, we always want to handle device ready, which is a PhoneGap event saying that you can start using plugins now. So you always want to wait for that to actually fire before you start using specific plugin code. So you delete all that in that step and replace it with the app initialization code I just went over. And then if you run it again, oh, I also skipped the slider. So we're just doing it very simple. This should look pretty familiar if you've done jQuery. We're just looking at the slider and changing that little 20 value to whatever it is. That's all that does. And so once you go through that, just test it out and make sure that you can actually, slider. That's really all that's going to change in that one. You try to, oops. If I copy in module 2, all right, so if I run that again, and again, if you don't have all the pairing and everything installed, you can try to open it in the browser and look at it. So this time my IP address matches, which is nice. So I just copied in the solution, or the module 2 code, and we can see the device is ready, fired down in the log there. And then you can see if I slide the slider, it does something. So that was sort of the goal of that, make sure all of that works right. Does anybody need help? All right. So on to the next step. In this next one, we're going to actually do the Spotify API call. You don't need to do any OAuth or that sort of thing for the requests that we're doing, but you can go take a look at the Spotify web API documentation that is linked to here. They've got a lot of different queries you can make and with using authorization as well. So you can get pretty much everything you might want to know about playlists and artists and everything. So Oops, all right. So in this part 1, we're going to go back into app.js, my app.js, and add the click handler. Pretty basic click handler. It's not, super fancy or anything. It's just kind of getting the job done. We're doing an AJAX call, which is very similar, same syntax as the jQuery one, if you're familiar with that. We're sending the data type as JSON that we're going to get back. The URL I set to there. And I'm actually appending the search term that they entered on the main page. And the media type in this case is song or track. Sorry, you see media type. This is actually something you could modify and add more to if you wanted to. Like some of the other sample apps I did, I had multiple media type selections. So you could use that code here and just figure out which type of media or artist they're trying to search and put that in there. And then on my success callback, I just am simply doing an alert to show that it worked and how many results we got back. So, and then an error handler, very basic. So you should try to do that and make sure that you see something come back with the number of results. It should look like this at this point. So if you guys, I'll give you a minute to work on that. Make sure that you guys are actually getting some results back. And please raise your hand if you have any issues at all.
There's a small typo in the look at the face.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, which?
It's word of my app alert. To opening for
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
see it.
Let me look. Oh, yep. I see it. Just one parenthesis there. Sorry.
So you test your code in production?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm hoping I'm going to hear music soon. I guess once we get to the next step here. You guys. So really, just in the next step, if you want to go on for people that are already there, we're actually going to define that list template. So that list page needs to have a template associated with it. And we're just going to put it in index.html. You can put it in separate files and you can make it a lot cleaner, but for the purposes of this workshop, we're keeping it simple. But the key is that you need to set an ID on the script. So I call it list template. And then you'll notice within it, let's see, we'll have some swipe outs and some different things that I had demoed at the beginning, but you're going to want to take this list template and add it to your index.html. So it's going to go right after, so where we defined that views tag, towards the end there is where we're going to start the media list template, which will end up being before that Cordova.js script include.
The code for the button click search is an extra.
Parenthesis?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Yeah. Did everybody hear that about the extra parenthesis? in the alert. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So once you add the list template, then you should actually, let me go back into, we're going to change that success function. So your parenthesis issue will go away. You'll remove that, and you're going to tell the router to load the list template that you just added into index.html. And the way that the response comes back from Spotify is in that format, response or resp.tracks. Or resp is obviously my object that I'm passing into the function, but tracks.items is the way to get the whole array of the tracks that were returned. So if you wanted to use Chrome tools and look at it in the network request, you could see the results, if that helps. So like for instance, here I am in the Chrome tools, and I can view that request, and there's all my data that came back. So you can see tracks at the top level, and then we're just taking all of those. Well, that's all the data that it contains, but there's a whole array of them that we're getting access to. And then we're referring to the different pieces of data on those through expressions. So you should be able to get this list page up by the end of this step. Anybody need help? Over here? I assume most people are familiar with the Chrome developer tools. They're really handy and can't live without them, really. And if you are having an error, then I would suggest opening it in the browser like I just did and trying to use the tools to see what kind of errors you might be getting. Oh, I see what's happening here. There's a problem with the double curly braces in the rendering. So I just noticed that the expressions that are supposed to be showing are not coming through here. In data item, for instance, that should be an expression. I noticed it on one of the other pages, but I guess I missed this one. But if you look at the solution code, then you'll see what it actually should be. Let me open that up quick just so you guys can see what. I guess Markdown doesn't like double curly braces in the code blocks. I need to probably escape it. Oops, that's not what I want.
It went out go to the solutions function too.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I wish I had seen that, but I'm trying to find a way to make this bigger. See how all of the expressions should be in curly braces, so that's kind of what's missing in those data items. So for the list template, anytime you see us using like the curly braces for each in this, that's going to iterate through the array and set the values for name and the artist name, album name, and so on that are in those expressions there with the actual value automatically. Anyway, I'm running out of time here, so I'm just going to move on a little. I'm sorry about the fact that those aren't showing. That's kind of an issue, but please just refer to the solution itself, and you'll see what it's supposed to be and what to copy in from there. So let's see here. We've changed over, set our data, and then we'll get our list back. You can delete the about page because we're not going to use it. And then in the module 4 is adding the item detail. So that last page is basically creating the template for this one. But you're going to want to take it from the solution project as well. And then you can actually see here, what I wanted to get across was the fact that you can use template helpers, which are ways to pre-process the data before it's displayed. There's times when you need to change the format that it's in, and you can use the built-in template helpers that Template 7, which is Framework 7's template library, has, or you can write your own. In this case, what I'm trying to point out here is the link that is in the list should, if the previous page was right, it would have said that the data template is item template and the context is this with the curly braces, which is the current item being iterated, and the one that you click on, that's going to, by default, it's going to try to just pass literally objects, which is not going to bind to anything. So we need to convert that to JSON with the helper. And so in the myapp.js, you can see I kind of tried to show you guys a picture of it happening in Chrome. So you can see that that's not going to work. You're going to get an error, that unexpected token error. And then you can fix it, though, by writing a stringify helper. So that's what I have here with Template 7 register helper stringify. I'm just using JSON stringify. And then this is like just a weird results coming back. Some of the results coming back have the wrong type of apostrophe, so I have to look for it and convert it to the HTML apostrophe character. And it only happens on a few of the results, so you could probably skip that and you'd probably be fine on most of the ones you click on, but there were a couple I ran across that had this weird, and it just comes back in the data like that, so that was the way to handle it. So it's just doing like a regex replace with that HTML character. So once you create your helper, you need to do it at the top before everything's initialized. So you can see in the code that it's doing that. And then if you go back and inspect now, you can see the data template and the data context here. It's actually all my JSON data. So now it's being passed properly, and it will bind on the detail page properly. So then when you get to here, you'll actually see the values that came back because they were passed right. So if you skip the stringify template, you'll get nothing. You will not move past the list page. So that's important. And the preview button should work at this point because this is just using HTML audio tag, so it will work whether or not you have a media plugin or not, and on the browser. So this preview should work fine. This popularity rank is just, it's a disabled control that I set to the value. It's a very popular song, obviously. So that's just sort of a visual way to show it. And then I have some styles I applied to fix up some of the formatting. If you want to copy those from the styles in, it'll change a little bit of the padding on some things that I thought looked a little better in the end. On the next one, I'm just going a little faster because we're supposed to end, but this one is basically adding the side menu, which I don't know if I demoed that at the beginning, but if you click the little bars, you're going to get a little side menu, and some people hate those, some people love them, so it's up to you. But if you want to add one to your app, this is how you would do it. And I just added simple handling. It's just doing an alert at this point, but you can go through and implement it however you want. But the way to do it, and Android calls it a navigation drawer, I hear hamburger menu, but the way that you would do it is pretty easy with Framework 7. They already have a panel overlay in the base template that we started with, so you're going to just replace that with what I have in the sample. So it just has like a simple paragraph element in the original template, and we're replacing it with a list and just going to be adding click handlers in the code below. Also, I wanted to mention the reveal effect of the panel. You can change it to cover if you like that effect better. So it's just another option on the panel itself. And they also have right panels. If you wanted a right panel, you can do panels on either side. I just did the left one because it's more common. And then you could go ahead and do like an extra implementation to, actually implement a favorites page or a settings page or about or whatever at this point, rather than just show an alert on click. And then swipe outs are the things where I was going left and right to do other actions like play, share, and favorite. And those are pretty easy as well. Like iOS uses them a lot. Like there's the Reminders app. You see it in a lot of the iOS apps. But the way that you do it is basically you just follow the example and you specify your swipe out content, and then if you want an action on the left and right, you define what you want there. You can have more than one depending on how you want it to look, and you can follow that to see how that works. I actually did the font awesome ×2 for those icons because they look too small in the way the line, so if you're wondering what that is, that just makes them double the size. Font Awesome has like 2 times, 3 times, I don't know. They have different options for making icons bigger if you wanted it to. Just looks better in this particular example. And then data item equals index. Yeah, so we basically already went through the whole. Actually, I don't know if I talked about the index is going to be the number of the one currently being iterated through. So when you're clicking an item in the swipe out code, you can see we have this data item equals index here. So when we're actually over in myapp.js, we're going to use that index, like this line here. This code is all going to be in a page handler, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of time to get into that, but what I wanted to point out was if you want to get the page context, that's the data that's associated with that page. So you have access to the full data for that page, and then if you reference this data set item, that's going to reference that data item attribute, which is going to be set to the index. So we can get the current index out of the context of the array. And that's how we can get the item that was clicked on. So that's what we're doing there. And then the preview handler, very similar. So you're just adding another handler in there on click. And then we're going to use the media plugin. So in this case, you would, if you're using the PhoneGap developer app, it's already included. So it should work off the bat. If you're using the PhoneGap CLI, you're going to want to make sure it's added. It's already configured in the config.xml, so you will automatically have it added if you take the project as is. It's going to, and you do a PhoneGap run iOS or Android, it's going to install all the plugins that are already configured in the config.xml for you. Here I have it set to play for 7 seconds just because. So I have the dependency. It's kind of hard because we're all kind of using a different way of viewing things, but there's a lot of options. Just be aware that it does use that plugin, so you will need it when you run it locally.
What does the save option do on the end of that?
That saves it to the config.xml for you. Yeah, so you should always use save, or you can just say one fell swoop Cordova plugins save or PhoneGap plugins save, and it'll add all of them. Same with the platforms, so that if somebody else takes your app, then they get all of the same settings that you had and all the same plugins. I really wanted to go through this, but it's already 12:02. But this is worth going through. For hybrid app development, these things tend to be the things people point out of why they suck. So it's nice, a lot of frameworks are actually dealing with them for us now, but if you're building an app using a framework or more from scratch, then you're going to want to make sure you're aware of these things. Like if somebody is tapping on a link, the link highlight, I was obnoxiously putting it yellow just to show that if you don't set that web tap highlight color, here's the two different ways to handle it. I've heard different things. I usually just use the transparent, but I think maybe certain versions of Android need that RGB one. But anyway, if you don't set those, then you're going to get a gray highlight by default around anything that you tap on, which makes it look obviously HTML. And then the user selection thing. So you can see how, like, if you're clicking on, if you touch on songs, you don't want that little menu to pop up and it to be outlined in blue because it looks like a web page. So you can disable that with the WebKit user select none. That's one thing I noticed that Framework 7 didn't handle everywhere. I'm going to ask them about that because I was able to click on some different things that I'm not sure why maybe they just haven't added that yet. But and then for Microsoft people, you can use the meta tag to do the same thing, which I believe is already included in the template by default. If you have a text input, obviously you don't want it to be none, so you need to make sure that those stay at text, otherwise you can't backspace or go back over your text, so you want to be careful for that. But you don't need to worry about any of this with a lot of frameworks now that are out there, take care of it for you, but just be aware of it. And then there's a glossy look that shows up if you don't have the WebKit appearance to none on iOS. It's going to give you that old school looking iOS button. So, but this is built into Framework 7 already, and Ionic, I believe. A lot of them already have it. Disable touch callout. So if you hold down on a link, you don't want that menu to pop up because that's a typical link menu. You want it to act more native. So that's another thing that you can set to none as WebKit touch callout. And you can, I put a list of things to try. Oh, and native scrolling. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with or heard about native scrolling, but it makes a huge difference. It's already built into the containers and Framework 7 and Ionic, I know for sure. But if you don't have WebKit overflow scrolling touch, then it's going to feel really different. It feels slow, and you don't have that momentum scrolling. So you could actually do some of the steps I have, go through if you're running it in the emulator or on your device, and do the remote debugging and change the value from something else, and you can try it on your phone and see how it feels, because it's definitely different. And then use system fonts to make it feel more native. It's obvious, like in a theme for iOS, then you should use those particular fonts. And these are already defaults in the Framework 7 stuff, so you don't have to worry about that. But it is something, if you use another framework, that you should be aware of. And then I have these optional steps. It's a good learning experience to open up your developer tools and play around with some of these values to see how much it changes the look of your app. So I kind of tried to give a couple ways to do that. And then performance tips. You shouldn't be sizing your images in the image itself. You shouldn't be setting widths and heights on it. You should serve it at the width and height that you want it, and across multiple platforms and resolutions. And then SVG is a great option, always scales well. Hardware accelerated animations and transitions are already built in, but they basically cause, by using this trick, it's kind of funky when I first saw it, and it didn't really make a lot of sense, but it's just by using the Translate 3D, you're tricking the apt to use the GPU, which is faster than the regular CPU. So your pages are going to slide faster. Your animations are going to feel faster and more native-like. So that's sort of the whole point of that. But a lot of that is taken care of for you in the frameworks that are pretty popular now. So, and then I wanted to mention the native transitions plugin, which is Telerik has a plugin marketplace that they have a lot of Cordova plugins, and that one is worth taking a look at. It's pretty neat. They actually mimic the way that iOS does their transitions in Android, and I believe Windows too. So they take a screenshot, and then which is in a more lightweight UI view, using like Objective-C, for instance, and then they do the transition on that, on the screenshot view, rather than the view with all the data in it. So it gives the appearance of better performance. So you can add that to your projects and use that or try it out if you want, if you feel like you want to try to improve even more on transitions. And then this is lazy loading of the images. I was just making a point of this. So when your list is loaded, this I'm doing filtering on. Those things that filtered had not been loaded in the initial viewport, so they're not showing the image because I set the lazy loading flag to make it faster. So you can set it or not set it depending on how you want your lists to load. But it's like virtual lists and lazy loading go together, and it's just a way of giving better performance by only displaying the items that are currently in the viewport size, and then getting the rest when they start scrolling. So you can see it in action by checking out that that filtering. I think that's pretty much it. But oh, and caching the views is always a good idea too, and that's another property you can do with Framework 7. The module 7 is worth going through. The content security policy we didn't get much chance to cover, but that is all linked to and how you should configure yours. And the one that works with this app is there, so you can add that to yours. But I recommend going to see that site where you can build yours out, because it's really helpful depending on the needs of your app. And you have to have the Cordova whitelist plugin. I mentioned the WebView bounce disallow overscroll property. It's like something that you're going to set in every one of your PhoneGap apps for now, unless we change the default in a future version. But it's set to cause this bounce effect for backwards compatibility reasons. So you don't really want it to look like that. So if you're trying to slide your app up and down and you don't have the property set right, then you're going to get this weird where the title bar or the nav bar should never come down from the top, and you'll see a bounce effect. So by default, the framework, by default, my template has it set to true. So if you look at the config.xml, it's referring to this property here, disallow overscroll. So you want to set that to true, and then the backup storage options, we're defaulting to iCloud, which a lot of people don't want, so you can set that to none, and that will change that default. So those are just some common preferences, and then we talk about the security policy. And if you're running on Android, make sure you add that allow navigation. That's also documented in the whitelisting guides. You can read more about that, but it will not work on your Android device unless you have that in there, this app anyway. Icons and splash screens. In this, the final sample, there's just a default icon that's used. So like on your home screen, that icon will actually show. If I go home, you can see I have this Spotify browser icon. That's what icon.png is set to right now. So you can just set one for the purposes of this kind of thing, but you're going to want to actually fully define all of your icons and splash screens for the size that's needed for that platform. And the final project I created has them all here. You can see them all defined for the latest versions of everything. And I mentioned I use the Ionic tool actually to do this for now. It's really, really useful. They have a sizing server that you can run this Ionic resources command and have them built out for you and then add it to the config.xml, and it makes it a lot easier for the moment. And then it will also add these two values which are needed for Android. You need to have the splash screen value such a screen. So it does that for you. It's just little details that you don't have to worry about, which is helpful. And then the splash screen delay can be set depending on how much loading you need to do at the beginning of your app. You may want to set that higher, or you may want to use the plugin to auto show it until you programmatically hide it. You can do that. The splash screen plugin allows you to tweak those things, so it's worth taking a look at. So I included it automatically in the plugin dependencies. So take a look at those plugin guides too to see more about what they do. But status bar just kind of helps the whole status bar formatting to make sure that it, and also to allow you to change the color. Since we did a dark theme, I set it to black. You can see in the styles.css that we're setting the background to black so that my white text there and icons show up nicely, but you can customize it per app. And the whitelist plugin obviously is the content security policy and securing your app. The media plugin automatically installs the file plugin because it needs it, so just let that happen. And splash screen I just talked about. And then that social sharing plugin is that native third-party plugin that is really useful. And that's also one that you can find in the Telerik marketplace, their plugin marketplace, but they work together. So they have some other ones that the guy that built that built a lot of really useful plugins. That, his name is Eddie Verbruggen. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but he has a lot of really neat plugins to check out. So I'm going to update all of this content and fix those template issues and add another page of links so that you guys can, like some of the things I brushed by quickly, I'll give you guys a little more, how to set up the Safari developer, make sure you get that menu enabled and how to do that, and add some more links that I think are useful. So sorry that it was so rushed, but we have a bigger audience than we expected, and I was trying to get through as much as possible. But either way, feel free to, contact me or talk to me. I'll be here all day and tomorrow. This is my contact, my Twitter and blog, GitHub. And like I said, I have some other sample apps built like this, but using different frameworks like Touchstone. And you can go try those out as well. And you can compare like the differences between them. So I didn't want to don't get too, if some of this seems weird, the way that the views were, or the way that you didn't like the way that you have to use classes to do this or that, there's tons of options. So this is just a good one to use for examples. And it actually turns out with a beautiful look at the end. So that's about it. Anyway, thanks guys.